Wahlberg stood in front of the mirror, his reflection a stark reminder of the transformation he had undergone. The once familiar features were now masked by a rough exterior, shaved head, tattoos peeking out from beneath his sleeves, and a hardened gaze that betrayed nothing of the man he truly was. He had traded his previous life for a dangerous masquerade, stepping into the role of a gunrunner with a fake name, Rico Martinez. It was a name that would serve as both shield and sword, protecting him in this perilous game and allowing him to wield influence among the very people he aimed to bring down. Before this mission, Wahlberg had been a dedicated agent, steadfast in his commitment to taking down criminal organizations that plagued society. Years of witnessing the devastation wrought by gun violence had fueled his resolve. Families shattered, communities torn apart, all at the hands of ruthless cartels. He knew he had to do something drastic, something that would allow him to infiltrate their ranks and gather the intelligence necessary to dismantle their operations from within. Now, with a burner phone tucked safely in his pocket, he was ready to begin. As he stepped out into the bustling streets, Wahlberg felt the electric pulse of the city, a world where danger lurked around every corner. He had studied the cartel's movements for months, learning their methods, their codes, and their hierarchy. He understood that trust was a currency more valuable than money in this underworld. It was essential for his survival. With each encounter, he needed to convince those around him that he was just another player in their deadly game, a desperate buyer looking to score weapons and earn respect. His first stop was a notorious bar known for its connections to the cartel. The dimly lit interior was filled with smoke and shadows, laughter mingling with whispered conversations. As Wahlberg took a seat at the bar, he observed the men around him, muscular figures adorned with tattoos that told tales of loyalty and betrayal. He could feel their eyes on him, assessing whether he was worthy of their attention or just another fool seeking glory among giants. Drawing a deep breath, Wahlberg ordered a drink and waited. He needed to project confidence while suppressing the unease gnawing at his insides. This was not just any assignment, it was personal. The stakes were higher than ever before, and failure meant not just the loss of his cover but potentially his life as well. Yet beneath the weight of this pressure lay an unyielding determination. He was here for one reason: to rip this cartel apart from the inside. As laughter erupted from a nearby table, Wahlberg steeled himself for the challenges ahead. He would play the role flawlessly, and if all went according to plan, they would soon learn that Rico Martinez was no ordinary buyer. He was a wolf in sheep's clothing, poised to unleash chaos within their ranks. In the weeks leading up to his mission, Wahlberg transformed himself into Rico Martinez, a persona he meticulously crafted to ensure he could navigate the treacherous underbelly of the cartel. He invested considerable time into perfecting every detail, from his wardrobe to his mannerisms. His clothes were a blend of the rugged and stylish, too tight on the arms to hint at power but loose enough to suggest he blended in effortlessly with the gritty surroundings he would soon inhabit. Wahlberg had assembled an arsenal of fake identity documents that were essential for establishing credibility. Each ounce of authenticity was crucial. If anyone detected even the slightest hint of deception, it could end his life before he could even blink. The weight of the fake wallet in his pocket felt like a heavy burden, loaded with the risks of being discovered. The name, Rico Martinez, had been meticulously chosen to resonate within the cartel's world, exotic enough to evoke respect, yet common enough not to raise suspicion. The burner phone he acquired represented more than just a communication device. It symbolized his complete immersion into this dark realm. It was stripped of personal connections and stored only with contact numbers of those who could help him leverage his way deeper into the organization. Giving up all ties to his former self was necessary for Wahlberg to survive this dangerous game. Each time he powered it on, he felt a surge of adrenaline, a reminder that each call could lead him further toward his goal or bring disaster upon him. To further solidify his disguise and ease any lingering nerves, Wahlberg practiced in front of a mirror, embodying the swagger and nonchalance that came with his new identity. He rehearsed phrases in both Spanish and English, ensuring that every word flowed naturally from his lips. Confidence was key. He must not only appear as a buyer but also as someone who understood the market's intricacies, someone who was not afraid to engage in business dealings rife with risk. Once fully prepared, Wahlberg ventured out into the city where anonymity was a cloak he wore tightly. He navigated through bustling marketplaces and shadowy alleys, absorbing every detail, the way men exchanged glances, whispered messages in dark corners, or relished their drinks as if they were sealing a pact. The atmosphere thickened with tension and excitement. It fueled his anticipation for what lay ahead. On arrival at the bar, Wahlberg's facade settled over him like a second skin. He was more than just a man disguised as a gunrunner. He was now an embodiment of determination cloaked in deception, resolutely intent on bringing down one of society's most vicious entities from within. Feeling the weight of his purpose, Wahlberg pushed through the door, ready to make Rico Martinez known among those who trafficked in fear and power. Wahlberg took a moment to steady himself before stepping into the bar, feeling the low thrum of music and muffled laughter wash over him like an intoxicating wave. As Rico Martinez, he was eager to engage with his first targets, men who wielded power and influence within the cartel, each one a potential ally or adversary. He scanned the room, noting their hardened expressions and guarded body language, understanding that trust was a luxury he could not afford. His first encounter was with a burly man named Alejandro, a notorious figure with a quick temper and an even quicker draw. Wahlberg approached him with a casual demeanor, leaning against the bar as if he belonged there. "I hear you're the guy to talk to about some business," he said, nodding toward Alejandro while keeping his voice steady. The man's piercing gaze met Wahlberg's, scrutinizing him closely for any hint of deceit. "Business is risky," Alejandro replied, his voice low and gravelly. "You sure you can handle it?" The tension in the air was palpable. Wahlberg could feel his heart race as he held Alejandro's gaze, willing himself to appear calm despite the rising stakes. "Risk is what I live for," Wahlberg shot back, forcing a smirk that masked his internal anxiety. He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "I'm looking to make a name for myself. Take some weight off your shoulders if you know what I mean." This line seemed to resonate with Alejandro, drawing him in like a moth to flame. The conversation shifted from cautious pleasantries to discussions of weapons and transactions, pushing Wahlberg deeper into the world he aimed to infiltrate. Each detail he shared needed to balance authenticity with calculated deception. Any misstep could raise suspicions that would unravel his carefully constructed cover. As they discussed potential deals, Wahlberg noted how swiftly Alejandro shifted from suspicion to intrigue, revealing the thin line between trust and betrayal in this dangerous environment. Over the next few days, Wahlberg met other cartel members, each encounter layered with tension and uncertainty. He had to navigate their personalities, discerning who could be trusted and who might turn on him at a moment's notice. There was Carlos, a cunning strategist known for his ruthless decisions, Maria, who held sway over many cartel transactions, and Javier, whose loyalty was often questioned. Each interaction brought its own set of challenges. Wahlberg had to balance showing enough bravado to earn respect while avoiding crossing any lines that could expose him as an outsider. The stakes were high. Every nod of approval or skeptical glance could pivot this precarious game toward danger or opportunity. As he immersed himself further into their world, Wahlberg reminded himself that gaining their trust was merely the first step in his mission. He had to play this role perfectly while carefully gathering intelligence that would ultimately serve his purpose, bringing down the cartel from within. With each passing day, the tension mounted like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. But Wahlberg remained resolute. He was not just another buyer. He was a wolf among sheep, ready to unleash chaos from within their ranks when the time came. As days turned into weeks, Wahlberg's efforts to gain the cartel's trust began to bear fruit. His opportunity to solidify his place within their ranks presented itself during a clandestine meeting arranged by Alejandro. The deal was simple yet dangerous, a significant transaction involving high-powered weaponry that would ensure Wahlberg's reputation as a serious player in this perilous world. The meeting took place in a dimly lit warehouse, an unassuming facade for the intense dealings that transpired within. The air was thick with anticipation and an underlying current of danger. Wahlberg arrived early, his heart pounding as he prepared mentally for the confrontation. He reviewed the details in his mind. Everything depended on his ability to appear confident and knowledgeable while keeping his true motives hidden. When Alejandro and a few key cartel members arrived, Wahlberg greeted them with a casual nod, masking the turmoil brewing inside him. As the crates were opened, revealing an array of weapons glinting in the low light, he felt a wave of adrenaline mixed with unease. This was not just business, it was a glimpse into the darkness he was determined to dismantle. "Impressive stock," Wahlberg said, forcing enthusiasm into his tone as he examined the weapons. He could see their eyes watching him closely, evaluating whether he was worthy of their trust. The stakes were incredibly high. One wrong move could expose him and shatter his cover. As negotiations progressed and numbers were exchanged, Wahlberg felt a growing sense of conflict within him. He had trained for this moment, practiced every line he needed to say, and yet he found himself grappling with the moral implications of what he was doing. Each weapon represented chaos and destruction, tools that could ruin lives and obliterate communities. It wasn't just a transaction, it was complicity in a world that thrived on violence and fear. Despite the internal struggle, Wahlberg pushed through, focusing on the mission at hand. He successfully completed the transaction, sealing the deal with Alejandro's firm handshake and promises of future collaboration. The rush of power coursed through him as they finalized the arrangement. He had proven himself in front of hardened criminals and gained their respect, but at what cost? As he left the warehouse, Wahlberg felt a mix of triumph and dread washing over him. He had played the part expertly, but as he stepped into the night, he couldn't shake the weight of his actions. Each success pulled him deeper into the cartel's web, forcing him to confront the grim reality of his undercover life. He knew that to achieve his goal of tearing the cartel apart from within, he would have to continue this charade, and each step would take him further into the abyss. Wahlberg clenched his jaw and steeled himself as he walked away from the shadows. The lines between right and wrong blurred with each transaction. He reminded himself that he was still focused on his ultimate purpose, to bring down an organization built on suffering, even if it meant temporarily embracing its dark allure. As Wahlberg continued to forge his path deeper into the cartel, he focused on developing relationships with key figures, each interaction a carefully plotted move in his high-stakes game of deception. Among those he sought to connect with were Maria and Carlos, influential players in the cartel's operations. He understood that trust in this world could mean life or death, so he approached each encounter with strategic intent. Maria, sharp-witted and resourceful, controlled many of the cartel's logistics and transactions. To win her over, Wahlberg fed her ego by praising her acumen and subtly suggesting new ideas to enhance their operations. "I've heard you've got one of the most efficient supply chains in the business," he would say with a loose grin, gauging her reaction. She took pride in her role, which allowed Wahlberg to weave himself into her confidence, gradually gaining access to crucial intel about shipment routes and potential vulnerabilities within the organization. With Carlos, however, the approach required more nuance. Known for his ruthlessness and cunning mind, Carlos had little patience for those who were not genuine. Wahlberg recognized that showing too much ambition could either impress or intimidate him, so he opted for a different strategy: curiosity. By asking probing questions about Carlos's past dealings and respectfully acknowledging his reputation in the field, Wahlberg cultivated a subtle bond founded on respect. Carlos relished being the center of attention. It was a psychological game that paid off as he unveiled snippets of information during their conversations, tales of turf wars and alliances that further illuminated the cartel's inner workings. The facade of friendship required constant maintenance. Every night at the bar was an act, casual laughter mingled with sober discussions about their operations when necessary. Wahlberg learned to read body language meticulously, distinguishing between casual banter and genuine camaraderie as he navigated dangerous waters. He dropped hints about his willingness to engage in riskier deals while skillfully withholding any information that could compromise him or his mission. Wahlberg's insider status allowed him to eavesdrop on conversations that often took place around whiskey-fueled bravado or amidst moments of unguarded honesty about their fears and vulnerabilities. The growing law enforcement pressure was palpable, lingering like smoke from a forgotten cigar. Each piece of information gathered transformed into another fragment of intel he could leverage later. But amid this intricate dance of deceit lay Wahlberg's internal conflict. Each relationship built was another thread binding him to a world steeped in crime. The psychological games played with these cartel figures were not without cost. He occasionally glanced inwards and questioned how far he could distance himself from his true motives without losing sight of them altogether. Yet Wahlberg clung to hope through every handshake and casual remark. Through manipulation came knowledge and power that would one day topple this empire rooted in suffering. As he continued deepening these connections, festival lights flickered above their heads. Beneath surface cheers might lurk resignations, for every alliance formed brought him closer to executing his ultimate plan, setting the stage for a reckoning that lay just beyond the horizon. As Wahlberg delved deeper into the cartel's operations, he felt increasingly comfortable in his role as Rico Martinez. His relationships with Maria and Carlos provided him access to valuable intelligence, but nothing could have prepared him for the revelation that would shake the foundation of his mission. One evening, while cycling through unguarded conversations at the bar, he overheard a hushed discussion that piqued his interest. It began innocently enough, a few men whispering over their drinks, until Wahlberg caught mention of a shipment marked for a location he had never heard of before. The name echoed ominously in his mind, but it was the context that sent a chill down his spine. Intrigued, he leaned in closer, pretending to engage in another conversation while listening carefully to the details being shared. What he uncovered was not just a regular arms deal. It involved trafficking in something far more sinister: human lives. The cartel was orchestrating a dark operation where they smuggled people across borders, exploiting desperation for profit. These individuals were promised safety and opportunity but instead faced a harrowing fate under the cartel's control. The gravity of this revelation hit Wahlberg like a punch to the gut. He had come to dismantle an organization built on violence, but now he found himself entangled in a web of human suffering that was wholly unexpected. The implications of this newfound knowledge forced Wahlberg to reassess everything, the strategy he had been employing and his own moral compass. He had originally justified his actions as part of a larger plan to take down the cartel, but now he faced a haunting dilemma. How could he contribute to an organization that profited from such cruelty? Each handshake and smile felt like a betrayal toward those whose lives hung in the balance. Determined to gather more information about this operation, Wahlberg took calculated risks over the following days. He engaged with various cartel members, subtly probing for details while maintaining his facade. The deeper he dug, however, the more dangerous the stakes became. He felt eyes on him. Suspicion lingered like smoke in the air, ready to ignite should any hint of treachery be discovered. As he pieced together fragments of information about the operation, Wahlberg realized that time was running out. He needed to expose this twisted side of the cartel not only to protect innocent lives but also as leverage to manipulate their power structures. The urgency of his mission intensified. It was no longer merely about infiltrating and dismantling. It was about saving lives caught in the crossfire. With each passing moment spent within their ranks, Wahlberg felt an internal tug-of-war between his undercover persona and his genuine desire for justice. As Rico Martinez, he had played his part well, but now faced with this dark truth, he knew he could no longer sit idly by. With renewed purpose coursing through him, Wahlberg prepared for the next steps. It was time to shift strategies and take decisive action against an evil far greater than he had ever imagined. The clock was ticking, and lives depended on what he would do next. Wahlberg felt the weight of urgency pressing down on him as he sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, a place that had become both a refuge and a prison. The revelation of the cartel's human trafficking operation had shifted everything. Time was no longer merely an ally, it was a race against darkness. As Rico Martinez, every decision he made could tilt the balance between success and fatal exposure. He knew he needed to craft a plan to dismantle the cartel from within, but before that, he had to ensure he remained undetected. He spread out maps and notes across the small table cluttered with takeout containers and legal pads. Every detail collected during his nights spent at the bar became currency in this dangerous game. Wahlberg took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus despite the adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He envisioned each movement meticulously, how to leverage his relationships with Maria and Carlos while positioning himself closer to Alejandro, who held much sway within the cartel's hierarchy. With hours ticking by, he began outlining exactly how to retrieve more information about their operations without raising alarms. Tasking himself with gathering evidence on smuggling routes rather than outright defiance seemed crucial. This would not only provide insight into their operations but also offer him the leverage needed to negotiate with law enforcement when the time arrived. The suspense of his dual existence tightened like a noose around him. Each conversation held potential landmines. Wahlberg practiced scenarios in which he could subtly encourage confessions or slip questions about upcoming shipments into casual banter without igniting suspicion. He couldn't afford any missteps. One wrong word could expose him as a traitor, leading directly to his death, a price far too steep for seeking justice. As Wahlberg hashed out his strategy, Shadows crawled up the walls under flickering streetlights outside his window, mirroring the unease within him. The thoughts of innocent lives caught in the cartel's web amplified his resolve but also intensified his fear. The possibility that each moment might bring discovery closer was intoxicatingly real. Staying true to Rico, he needed to further infiltrate their darkest drives while maintaining an exterior that garnered trust rather than scrutiny. Perhaps using misinformation could shift suspicion away from himself. He considered feigning interest in more illegal dealings tied directly to human trafficking operations under Diego, an upcoming player rumored to be stepping into prominence. As Wahlberg developed this dangerous plan, layers of paranoia crept in. Who could he truly trust? He envisioned discussing this direction with Maria or Carlos, gauging their reactions carefully for any glimmer of loyalty towards Alejandro or lingering ties outside their organization. Would they see him as an ally or suspect ulterior motives? Despite those daunting thoughts swirling within him, Wahlberg knew he could not falter now. Lives depended on unraveling this empire woven from human suffering threads. The stakes had never been higher as he solidified plans for confrontation trapped between two worlds, one consumed by crime and another yearning for justice amidst chaos. With every tick of the clock echoing around him, Wahlberg steeled himself internally. It was not only about survival anymore, it was about making certain that evil could not take root in silence. He prepared himself for action, one false move notwithstanding, knowing soon enough that darkness is often hardest to uproot from within its own grasp. The time for Wahlberg to confront the cartel leaders had finally arrived. He stood at the entrance of an abandoned warehouse, a chilling wind sweeping through the cracks in the walls as he waited for his contacts to arrive. This was no longer just about playing the role of Rico Martinez. It was about revealing his true intentions and leveraging everything he had learned against the very organization that had plunged him into a world of moral ambiguity. As Maria, Carlos, and Alejandro stepped into the dimly lit space, tension crackled in the air. Wahlberg's heart raced, but he forced himself to breathe steadily. He had spent weeks cultivating relationships with these individuals, and now he needed to turn that trust into a weapon. The stakes couldn't be higher. One miscalculation would mean not only his demise but potentially the lives of countless innocent victims caught in the cartel's web. Rico, Alejandro boomed, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. I hope you have good news for us. Wahlberg stepped forward, masking his anxiety with confidence. I do, he replied, feigning enthusiasm while calculating every word. I've been gathering intel that could change our operations. The men exchanged glances, curiosity piqued. He could sense their eagerness. They were intrigued by what he might reveal about their rivals or smuggling routes. But Wahlberg wasn't there to share information, he was there to expose their corruption. I know all about the shipments, Wahlberg continued, punctuating his words carefully. The weapons are just a front for something much darker, human trafficking. Gasps erupted from Maria and Carlos as they processed his words, but Alejandro's expression hardened into a scowl. You're lying. You don't know what you're talking about. No, Wahlberg countered sharply, pulling out printed documents and photographs detailing smuggling routes and shipments associated with human trafficking operations. I've been collecting proof, a mountain of it. He watched as their faces shifted from disbelief to realization as they understood the full weight of what he was saying. The danger they faced was more profound than any turf war or gun deal. It was a reckoning of their own making. Alejandro, Wahlberg said boldly, locking eyes with him, you either cooperate with me in dismantling this operation or face exposure. And let's not kid ourselves. Law enforcement is already closing in on your operations. The room fell silent, tension thickening like fog around them. Alejandro's bravado faltered momentarily as uncertainty crept into his demeanor. What do you want? Wahlberg seized on this moment of vulnerability. You will provide me access to your networks and allow me to coordinate with law enforcement under my terms. Each word dripped with importance. This was not merely a demand but an ultimatum. Before Alejandro could respond, Wahlberg pressed further, outlining how they could reshape their operations away from human trafficking while still maintaining power within the cartel's framework. A way out that would protect them but also serve justice. As emotions roiled within him, adrenaline mixed with fear, Wahlberg stood ready for whatever move these men would make next. The time for games had ended. This confrontation would determine not only his fate but also whether lives could be saved from the depths of darkness that surrounded them. With each passing heartbeat echoing in his ears, Wahlberg prepared for resistance or acceptance, the crescendo of conflict hanging heavy in the air as he awaited their response to this charged revelation that could change everything forever. The confrontation in the warehouse had sent shockwaves through the cartel, and Wahlberg watched as chaos erupted in its aftermath. Within hours, whispers of betrayal and fear spread like wildfire among the ranks, igniting suspicion that turned allies into enemies. His revelation about human trafficking had not only exposed a dark secret but also fractured the very foundation of trust that held the cartel together. As Wahlberg stepped out into the cool night air, he could still feel the tension radiating from that dimly lit space. He had played his part, but now it was time for the consequences to unfold. News of his demands reached every corner of their operations, and soon enough, members began to question loyalty. Alejandro's authority waned as those who had once respected him now eyed him with doubt. The seeds of paranoia were sown deeply within their ranks. Maria and Carlos, two figures he had cultivated relationships with, found themselves at a crossroads. Maria hesitated when confronted by other members about Wahlberg's claims. Her loyalty was tested as she struggled between protecting her own interests and standing by her former allies. She overheard accusations hurled at Alejandro, some suggesting he had orchestrated their downfall by allowing an outsider into their operations. Carlos, once known for his cunning ability to maneuver through tight situations, felt pressure mounting from both sides. He began to weave his own narrative, subtly aligning himself with those who were willing to turn against Alejandro while distancing himself from Maria. The tension escalated into confrontations where accusations flew like bullets, the very sense of brotherhood among them crumbled under scrutiny. Wahlberg stayed vigilant, knowing that each act of betrayal would eventually come back to him. He used this discord to gather more information. Eavesdropping on furtive conversations became second nature as he moved through bars and alleyways populated by nervous cartel members. Each snippet of gossip painted a clearer picture of the power struggles unfolding within the organization. The tipping point came one fateful evening when Alejandro called an emergency meeting at another secluded location, a desperate attempt to reclaim control over his fragmented empire. The air was thick with anticipation as Wahlberg decided to infiltrate this gathering under the guise of still being part of their inner circle. As he entered the room filled with mistrustful eyes, Wahlberg sensed a storm brewing. Alejandro stood before his fractured assembly, trying to rally what remained of his loyalists. "We must root out this traitor," he declared fiercely, pointing fingers at anyone who might have fed information to Wahlberg. But in the shadows stood Carlos and Maria, caught in a web they couldn't escape from without implicating themselves further. Their alliances splintered further as they weighed their options: betray Alejandro or risk becoming collateral damage in a battle for power that threatened to consume them all. In this moment of reckoning, Wahlberg realized just how pivotal his actions had become in dismantling not only a criminal organization but also revealing the darkness lurking within human nature itself. The chaos created by his revelation would serve as both a weapon against the cartel and a reminder that trust could be just as deadly as any gunshot fired in anger. As tensions escalated and loyalties shifted like sand beneath their feet, Wahlberg felt an unsettling thrill course through him, a mix of fear and exhilaration, as he prepared for what would come next in this deadly game where lives hung in the balance and betrayal was just around every corner. As Wahlberg stood on the precipice of his mission's conclusion, he reflected on the tumultuous journey he had undertaken as Rico Martinez. The transformation from a dedicated agent to an undercover gunrunner was both a perilous gamble and a necessary sacrifice in his quest for justice. Every step he had taken plunged him deeper into the shadows of the cartel's operations, revealing not only the dark realities of organized crime but also the complexities of human nature itself. The chaos he had orchestrated, the fractures within the cartel, had started a chain reaction that would reverberate through their ranks for months to come. Trust had been dismantled, and the fear of betrayal hung heavy in the air like a suffocating fog. Wahlberg understood that while he had successfully played his part in exposing their corruption, it came at a significant cost. Lives were forever altered, and the line between right and wrong blurred with every decision made. He felt a sense of redemption wash over him amidst the turmoil. Wahlberg had entered this world primarily to dismantle an organization that profited from suffering, but in doing so, he discovered his own capacity for resilience and moral fortitude. He was no longer merely a bystander observing the horrors inflicted upon innocent lives. He had become an active participant in seeking to right those wrongs. Yet this journey had also revealed the high stakes of his undertaking. Many innocent lives remained at risk even after his intervention, and the chaos unleashed could spiral out of control. Emerging from the world of crime into the light of day brought its own set of challenges. The aftermath of his actions would demand vigilance. Wahlberg knew that dismantling one cartel didn't eliminate the threat posed by others lurking in the shadows. He felt the burden of responsibility weighing heavily on him, knowing he would have to continue to fight against organized crime long after this chapter closed. Moreover, Wahlberg's relationships with figures like Maria and Carlos highlighted the personal costs associated with his mission. They were not just pawns in his game, they were individuals with their own struggles, caught in a web woven by greed and desperation. Their fates were intertwined with his actions. Would they emerge from this chaos as allies or casualties? As he walked away from the remnants of the confrontation, Wahlberg resolved to use what he had learned during this harrowing experience to fuel his ongoing battle against crime. His transformation into Rico Martinez was not merely an act, it was a powerful reminder of how deeply one man's fight could impact many lives. There would be more battles ahead, but he felt an unwavering commitment to ensure that darkness did not prevail unchecked. In this fight against organized crime, Wahlberg realized that redemption often comes at a heavy price, and true justice requires relentless determination. Each step forward would be fraught with uncertainty, but he was prepared to face whatever lay ahead, ready to turn his hard-earned insights into tools for change, one life at a time. With renewed purpose coursing through him, Wahlberg embraced his role not just as an infiltrator but as a beacon for those lost in despair, a guardian rising from within darkness to pursue hope.